So I want to bring up Kristy Drutman, the founder and CEO of Browngirl Green and the Green Jobs Board, and Julia Jackson, founder of Grounded, for the next conversation. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for today's conversation. I'm so excited to be joined by my friend Julia Jackson here, and I just wanted to, dive into this conversation by setting the tone that the climate crisis is very apparent, it's urgent, and business leaders have a distinct role to play in that. And the role that I see business leaders playing in that conversation is being able to push the limits of what it means to be a business owner these days. We have no more time to do the bare minimum, and that means even going beyond, some of these metrics like net zero, or, trying to just meet your bottom line. We need to go beyond that. We need to be re-envisioning the future of what sustainability means and go towards what we're going to be discussing, which is a regenerative future. And so we're going to have Julia kind of dive into that. And I just wanted to also introduce myself. My name's Kristy Drutman. I'm the founder of Browngirl Green, which is a multimedia platform focused on environmental advocacy and communications. And I'm also here representing the Green Jobs Board, which we are tabling here at Techonomy, which is a social media platform also recruiting people to the green economy. So definitely check us out, and we'll connect after this. So Julia, I would love for you to dive into your journey of climate advocacy, if you can share the story of how you got to where you are today.
Thanks, Kristy. Thanks so much for having me. Nice to meet you in person, Josh, finally. And yeah, what a pleasure to be on stage with you. My journey began, I'd say, in my late 20s. I'm 34 now. In 2017, actually, when the Tubbs fire hit my community, it was $9 billion worth of damage. And it felt quite apocalyptic, actually. It was really scary to drive down a freeway with a fire corridor and see the hospital on fire. And that was really my wake-up call. I'd always, of course, loved the planet, but I didn't understand the urgency that we're up against. And I love to read, so I started diving deeper. And the more I read, the more alarmed I got. And a lot of what I consumed, like David Wallace Wells' Uninhabitable Earth, the IPCC report, shows that we've got a really urgent timeline to really turn the climate crisis around. We were just at an event last night, and the climate clock was there saying 6 years, and my eco-anxiety started to tick up a little bit. And then underneath it showed only 13% of the global energy economy is renewable. So we really do need to step up. I think that businesses can play a huge role in this transition to a clean energy economy and clean jobs, green jobs that we so desperately need in the 6 years we have left to turn this around. So thank you for the work you're doing, because we need those jobs. And can we turn this around? I absolutely believe we can. I founded Grounded, which is an organization focused on grant making to climate solutions, and also amplifying and supporting solutions to the climate crisis in 3 areas. 1, in clean energy. 2, in drawdown solutions, not tech that draws down carbon from the atmosphere, but more nature-based, earth-based systems like mangroves, restoration of critical ecosystems and carbon sinks that can really start drawing down carbon, and already are in a lot of cases. Like the Amazon, for instance, we've deforested 17% of the Amazon, and it sequesters 5% of GHGs annually. And the tipping point for the Amazon is 20 to 25%. And so we can't afford to keep deforesting the Amazon at the rate we're deforesting it. So that's why I'm wearing this shirt up here. I've got some great friends in the audience. I just want to give a quick shout out. Jojo Mehta and Sarah Coulter are here, co-founder of Stop Ecocide International. And Sarah is deputy director of Stop Ecocide International. And they're really, I think this is a huge solution to the climate crisis. It's seeking to make ecocide the 5th crime against peace in the International Criminal Court, so we can stop deforesting. I think it's about 65,000 hectares per day currently. We need that to stop if we want to stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and businesses can play a huge role.
I love all of this. Thank you for saying that. I really wanted to tap into specifically what you were talking about the need for nature-based solutions that are centering, local communities, indigenous communities, people on the front lines, because currently for people who don't know, most climate finance or funding that's going to climate solutions is going to decarbonizing technologies, which is great and good, but what happens to communities on the ground who also don't receive that philanthropic funding? And so I want to talk about what role do you feel businesses could play to be recentering local communities, frontline communities, that they haven't been doing in the past?
I think a huge role, and also to note, the latest IPCC report does say we actually do need carbon capturing technology. I'm not so worried about funding going to these like silver bullet tech solutions that can draw down atmospheric carbon. I'm a lot more worried about funding making it to communities on the ground that are safeguarding biodiversity, terrestrial carbon, and our healthy biosphere. So I do think it's critical to scale up. Currently less than 2% of philanthropic giving goes to the environment, and of that, a tiny, tiny fraction makes it to frontline communities on the ground. And indigenous communities in particular are safeguarding 80% of the Earth's biodiversity and 40% of terrestrial carbon, so all carbon on land. So it's in our best interest to really ensure that these communities continue safeguarding that land. But then also, I've been thinking more about there's over 1 billion acres of fallow land that's just sitting there and also emitting carbon. I think in the drawdown statistic in 2017, there was 1.1 billion acres. So I don't know what this recent stat, but that's a lot of fallow land just sitting there and devalued because it can't produce food. And so what if we regenerated that land and actually, instead of it emitting carbon because it doesn't have any way to sequester carbon, turned it into regenerative spaces, because it's just currently emitting carbon into the atmosphere once it becomes fallow. So there's a lot of solutions we can deploy way more capital to, but I do think it's imperative to support frontline indigenous communities who are they're really at the front lines of protecting these vital territories of the earth. Completely.
And I think, another big issue that keeps coming up with businesses is this concept of greenwashing. I think, as a young person and someone who has also partnered with brands on my platform using social media, there's a lot of brands that claim to be sustainable, claim to have this vision to address climate change, but maybe they aren't necessarily meeting the mark in a way that feels authentic or has that accountability to some of these communities. I just want to know some of your thoughts on that, specifically when it comes to concepts like net zero. Because a lot of businesses now, that's a big buzzword, net zero. But you bring up a lot of the time, which I love, that businesses need to be net positive. Could you educate people more about what that means, and how can businesses just keep pushing the bill on climate rather than just sticking to the bare minimum?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I will say something that might seem a little controversial, but I actually don't like the term sustainability because I think we're sustaining ourselves off of a cliff. I think we really need to be regenerative. I really think that we need to move beyond net zero to net positive. My friend Bill McDonough, who wrote the book Cradle to Cradle and is one of the founders of a circular economy, talks about really going beyond net zero to be net positive, and what does that actually look like in practice with businesses? I think it means going beyond, so not just saying I will produce less CO2 emissions, 20% less by 2050, which is way too late, but how do you become net positive by 2030, which is really the time scale we need for businesses to get on board. I think it's also important to note that only 7 countries are on track to reach the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is an agreement that basically was an agreement between a bunch of countries saying as each country has to stay well below 1.5 degrees Celsius. I think the latest IPCC report says that we're going to be at 2.5 Celsius, and only 6 countries are on track to actually reach that target.
Wow.
And so I don't think we can really rely on governments to stay below. I think we need the business sector to step up and look at just your supply chains. Are you deforesting old growths? Like for instance, IKEA, they're known as a really green company. And I actually randomly was at my hairdresser, and I was asking, we just got in deep conversation. She was from Estonia. She's like, what do you do? I'm in the environmental space. She's like, oh, I'm from Estonia. My friend started a whole group in Estonia protesting IKEA because they were deforesting old growths in their supply chain. And I'm like, what? Like, IKEA's, like, I thought IKEA was like doing all the right things. And then Kevin Patel, our mutual friend, who's a climate youth activist, confronted the CEO, and he had no idea. And at least that's what he told him. And so I think it's really imperative to know, if you do operate a company, look at your supply chain. Are you sourcing from materials that are deforesting old growths, which are, more importantly than planting trees, we need to protect old growths through proforestation. We hear reforestation, but proforestation, our old growths are efficient carbon sequestering machines. They've been there for eons, and we need to keep them intact. And so making sure that in your supply chain you're not committing ecocide is one. It depends what company you're in. If you're in the fashion industry too, there's a lot of innovations in textiles. I know that my friend Elisa created a non-fossil fuel derived biodegradable polymer alternative for fashion houses. They're very much in the early stages, but there's a lot of innovation happening in material science. There's so much technology that can be implemented in businesses, but I do think if there is philanthropic capital to be put anywhere, really supporting indigenous frontline communities and conservation efforts, and of course stopping ecocide and other legal frameworks that will make it illegal to destroy our planet.
Ooh, I love that. It's amazing. And, as someone who is a co-founder of a Green Jobs Board, I wanted to talk about, what do we feel is the vision or the future of the green economy? I think businesses, all the businesses here at some point feel invested in being a green employer. Mm-hmm. But what do you think is really important for them to be thinking about for this next generation of, hiring people in, creating a workspace that actually inspires the next generation to be a part of the green economy? How do you think businesses can communicate that better? Like, not just having a sustainability team, but actually embedding being green in all different parts of their business. That way more people will want to join, work that's actually meaningful and will actually make an impact.
I think that you should actually answer that question, actually, but okay. I think partnering with Browngirl Green, the work you're doing is amazing. To get a lot more jobs during this clean energy transition, and that is like awesome work that you're doing. So please come up to Kristy. How many people so far have signed up on your?
We now are around 20,000 people in America right now are
awesome.
Subscribed to us, which is amazing. Thank you for that plug. I appreciate it. Well, I guess my answer to that question, following up on that, I think it'd be amazing to see more businesses, be able to communicate their ESG goals in a way that isn't just about PR, but is actually about their commitment and accountability to community. So it would be really great if not only they have ESG metrics, but they actually are doing programming and actually putting budgets behind, community support. I have an amazing partnership with Toms of Maine, and what they've been doing is they launched an amazing program that's a mentorship program and an incubator program for climate activists. They're giving $20,000 grants to 5 climate activists. They're having people like me become mentors, and they're building programming around that as a brand. And brands need to be doing more things like that, where it's not just we care about being eco-friendly. We're actually putting funding, resources, and infrastructure to make that happen. Yeah. I think it's so important for that kind of leadership to be exuded. So we only have a minute left, which is wild because I could talk to you for hours. But I just wanted to know, could you paint out a picture to leave the audience with on why do you think business can be a leader right now? Why do you think there's such an opportunity that business leaders can seize in this moment to change the tides on this issue?
I think we absolutely need businesses. sustainability budgets in a lot of corporations are oftentimes like the smallest budget in an organization. I would challenge everyone here to see if you could increase that budget substantially, and also read books, read Cradle to Cradle. There's a book that really inspired me, Drawdown: 100 Solutions to Turn Around the Climate Crisis. Paul Hawken has a latest book called Regeneration, Ending the Climate Crisis in One Generation. There's another book called Donut Economics by Kate Raworth, How to Stay Within the Confines of the 9 Planetary Boundaries, according to Johan Rockström. I mean, there's so many resources out there. I'd say that turn to those. Those are really inspiring and can motivate you to really ignite a fire within your organization.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for joining us today.